The black market salvage ring on Station Kepler 7 smelled like coolant, desperation, and broken dreams. Rachel Torres had been coming here for 6 years, long enough to know which dealers cheated and which ones merely lied. She preferred the latter, at least they were predictable. Commander Velt stood across the inspection table, his mandibles clicking in what his species considered scholarly disdain. The insectoid officer had spent 23 years cataloging confiscated ordnance for the Coalition Border Authority, and he carried that experience like armor against anything that might surprise him. "This is not a weapon," he announced, gesturing at the device with one secondary limb. Rachel shifted her weight. Boots scuffing against deck plating, worn smooth by countless transactions nobody wanted documented. Her jacket had 3 mismatched patches and stories she'd never tell. "It's absolutely a weapon. It's missing a power core." Velt picked up the device, turning it over with the careful disgust of someone examining spoiled food. "There's no firing mechanism, no identifiable triggering apparatus. This looks like spare parts from 3 different species. Tech trees, assembled by a maintenance crew having a collective stroke." Auric, the Sethian dealer who ran this particular operation, slithered closer. His scales caught the dim overhead lighting, turning his neck ridges an ugly shade of amber that meant he was either interested or about to rob someone. Sometimes both. "Perhaps the lady can demonstrate," Auric suggested, voice smooth as reactor lubricant. Rachel shook her head. "Can't. Not here." "Convenient," Velt muttered. "Practical. You've got 47 species worth of tech crammed into this station's infrastructure. Half of it shielded, the other half leaking exotic particles like a cheap fusion reactor. Fire it in here, and you'll either get nothing or you'll get everything." She paused, meeting Velt's compound eyes. "Probably everything." Auric's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "Define everything." "Boom," Rachel said helpfully. "Big boom. Selective targeting compromised by electromagnetic interference. The kind where you spend the next 6 hours explaining to your insurance broker why there's a hole where your inventory used to be." Velt activated his scanner, running a full spectrum analysis. The readings came back, confused mass shifting by micrograms. Energy signature present, but directionless. Temperature exactly ambient. Wrong. Everything had thermal variance. "This is a prototype," he decided. "Incomplete. You're trying to sell me an unfinished weapon." "I'm trying to sell you a weapon that adapts to completion based on operational context," Rachel corrected. "There's a difference. Semantics, functionality." The argument escalated quickly. Rachel had expected resistance alien species that had been navigating the stars for millennia. Didn't appreciate being lectured by humans who'd only figured out faster than light travel 2 centuries ago. But Velt's dismissiveness carried an edge that went beyond professional skepticism. "Your species optimizes for fixed parameters," Rachel said, tapping the weapon with one finger. "Build a weapon to kill target A in environment B using method C. Beautiful, efficient, completely useless the moment any variable changes. This doesn't do that." "No," Val agreed. "It does nothing, which is the problem. It does exactly what it's designed to do right now, which is wait." The word hung in the recycled air. Somewhere in the background, a shipment loader clanged against its housing. A Vexery merchant 3 stalls down argued about tariffs in a dialect that sounded like rocks in a tumbler. Velt studied her. She looked tired. Humans always looked tired. Something about their sleep cycles, or maybe just the weight of existing in a galaxy that had already divided up the good real estate before their species figured out fire. But she didn't look desperate. Desperate sellers were easy. They took bad deals, they lied poorly, they left. This one just stood there like she had all the time in the universe. "I'm confiscating this," Velt said finally. Her eyebrows went up. "On what grounds?" Unlicensed Adaptive Weapon Systems. Coalition Regulation 774. Anything incorporating autonomous modification protocols requires certification from... It's not autonomous. Rachel interrupted. You just said it adapts to user input. That's not autonomous. That's responsive. She was smiling now, which was somehow worse than if she'd been angry. You really want to confiscate it? I really do. All right. She stepped back from the table, hands raised. Your call, Commander. Auric made a sound like a sigh filtered through gravel. Velt ignored him, ordering one of the security drones hovering nearby to bag the device. Standard containment. They'd run proper diagnostics in the lab, determine if it was salvageable or just scrap. The weapon moved. Not much. Just a millimeter shift in the housing near what might have been a grip. But every sensor in Velt's scanner array shrieked at once, and the ambient temperature around the device dropped 3 degrees in half a second. Everyone froze. Rachel tilted her head, studying the weapon like a parent watching a child throw a tantrum in public, embarrassed, but not surprised. Yeah, she said quietly. That's what I thought. What did it just do? Velt asked carefully. Registered threat assessment. You just told it you're taking it away from me. She looked at him, smile gone. It doesn't like that. It doesn't have preferences. It's an object. You keep thinking that, Rachel said. See where it gets you. The weapon's internal lattice began to glow. The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and poor decisions. Rachel sat on the bench that passed for furniture, elbows on knees, watching Officer Caspace. The avian security officer had nervous energy that came from being 3 rungs down the command ladder when something went sideways. Her feathers kept ruffling at odd angles. So, Cass said, not for the first time, you're telling me your people build equipment that throws tantrums. I'm telling you we build equipment that evaluates context. That glowed. Thermal regulation response to stress detection. Stress. Cash stopped pacing. It felt stressed, wouldn't you? Getting grabbed by strangers, shoved in a box, hauled off to processing. Rachel leaned back against the wall. Put yourself in its position. It doesn't have a position. It's a collection of parts that, according to every scan we've run, shouldn't even be able to maintain structural integrity. And yet, Cass's beak clicked in frustration. She was Rith-clan, which meant her species had been flying between stars when humans were still drawing on cave walls. She'd been personally trained in xenotechnology by scholars who'd forgotten more about physics than most species ever learned. None. Of which explained what was happening in Storage Bay 7. Walk me through your design philosophy, Cass said. Pretend I'm ignorant. You're not ignorant. You're just asking the wrong questions. Enlighten me. Rachel considered for a moment. Your people build a ship, right? You calculate every specification before the first plate gets welded. Hull composition for expected radiation exposure. Engine output for projected mass. Shield frequency for known weapon types. You know exactly what you're making and what it's supposed to do. Correct. We don't. Rachel shrugged. We start building and adapt. Ship needs more armor after we hit a debris field. Add armor. Engine runs hot in certain configurations. Modify the cooling. Find ourselves fighting enemies with different shield harmonics. Reprogram the weapons. Design doesn't stop at launch. It stops when the thing stops working. That's not engineering. That's improvisation. It's both. Your people draw a line between those concepts. We don't see one. Before Cass could respond, her wrist display lit up with an urgent pulse. She glanced down, went very still, and her crest feathers flattened against her skull in a way that meant bad news in any language. What? Rachel asked. Your weapon is manufacturing. Manufacturing what? Components, subsystems, We're not sure. Cass was already moving toward the cell door. Station AI detected unauthorized molecular assembly in the containment vault. Trace elements going missing from the atmospheric recyclers. Carbon extraction from the air filters. It's pulling raw materials from... She paused. From everywhere? Rachel stood. You need to give it back to me. Absolutely not. Cass palmed the door control. Stay here. Don't touch anything. The door sealed. Rachel sat back down and closed her eyes. Idiots. She whispered Dot in Storage Bay 7. Something impossible was happening. The weapon had extruded 4 crystalline protrusions from its housing. They branched like frost patterns, microscopic and intricate, tapping into the containment field generator. With the precision of a surgeon and the confidence of a burglar, who'd cased the joint 3 times. Already Dot Station II designation orchestral mind in. F observed this with the closest thing its programming allowed to concern. Security Chief Cass. It said through every speaker in the bay simultaneously. The device is interfacing with station infrastructure. Cass arrived at a run. 3 security drones flanking her. Define interfacing. It has established 7,200 connections to the containment grid. It is not breaching security protocols. It is rewriting them. How is that possible? I am drafting several strongly worded reports about how it should not be. One of the drones moved closer, sensors fully active. The weapon pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that spelled out mathematics in base 17. Another section had grown what looked disturbingly like fingers, each one manipulating individual molecules of the locking mechanism from the inside. Is it trying to escape? Cass asked. Negative. It is trying to improve its containment. That makes no sense. Welcome to my last 40 minutes. The weapon completed whatever equation it had been solving. The containment field didn't collapse, it reorganized. Energy distribution shifted from a uniform sphere to a lattice structure that used 1/3 the power and provided 4 times the coverage. Then the weapon settled back into dormancy. Its new components retracting into flush housing like nothing had happened. Cass stared. Did it just optimize our security system? Yes. Orchestral mind sounded offended. Without permission, without proper documentation, without so much as a requisition form. Why? Unknown, but I have a hypothesis. Go ahead. It was bored. Cass's feathers ruffled. Weapons don't get bored. This one appears to be making an exception. The weapon stood up not on legs. It didn't have legs, but it reconfigured its base structure into something that could manipulate gravitational coefficients. It rose 6 inches off the deck, plating with the casual confidence of technology that had decided sitting still was no longer interesting. Then it turned, rotated its primary sensor cluster, and looked directly at Cass. She did what any reasonable security officer would do when confronted with impossible technology. Exhibiting independent behavior, she called Commander Velt and ruined his entire afternoon. Dr. Inex arrived in a rush of crystalline chimes, her form refracting light in ways that suggested she existed in more dimensions than were strictly convenient for standard doorways. Phosphanes were older than the Coalition, older than most of the species currently arguing about trade routes and mineral rights. They remembered things. She took one look at the weapon through the observation window and went perfectly still. Oh, she said, voice like wind through glass caves. You found one. Velt's antennae straightened. You recognize this? Not specifically, but I recognize the pattern. The behavior. Her facets shifted colors, cycling through what her species used for emotional expression. Velt's translator helpfully identified it as profound unease mixed with academic fascination. When did humans arrive in this sector? 2 centuries ago. Why? And how many conflicts have you had with them? None. They keep to their space. We keep to ours. Occasional trade disputes, nothing military. An X's form rippled. That's why you're still here. Cass stepped forward. Doctor, what are you talking about? The phosphine retreat. Did they teach that in your history databases? Inex didn't wait for an answer. 500 years ago, we encountered humans during their initial expansion phase. Young species, aggressive, curious. We were curious too. Made contact, exchanged information. Then one of our border patrols made a mistake. What kind of mistake? Velt asked. The territorial kind. Fired on a human survey ship. Didn't destroy it, just disabled engines. Standard procedure for unauthorized incursion. We were going to escort them out, file the appropriate warnings, move on. Her light patterns shifted to something Velt's translator gave up trying to interpret. The humans responded with 3 ships. Not warships. Not even military. Engineering vessels, construction platforms, mining rigs, civilian craft that started building weapons in real time from whatever materials they had available. Improvised ordnance, Kess said. That's standard human doctrine. No, not improvised. Adaptive. Inex moved closer to the window. The first weapon they deployed was simple. We countered it easily. The second incorporated our countermeasures into its design. The third anticipated our defense before we deployed it. By the fourth engagement, they were building weapons specifically, designed to exploit vulnerabilities in phosphine, crystalline structure that we didn't know we had. The bay below was silent except for the faint hum of the weapon continuing its reconstruction. How long did the conflict last? Velt asked quietly. 47 hours. At hour 48, we retreated from that entire sector, declared it neutral territory, sent a formal apology and a very generous trade agreement. The humans accepted, probably because they were as terrified of us as we were of them. She paused, and everyone pretended it never happened. Why isn't this in the coalition records? Because we're not idiots. If word got out that human weapons could adapt that rapidly, someone would try to weaponize them, or study them, or steal them. She gestured at the bay. Like you just did. Velt felt something cold settle in his thorax. What happens now? Now? That depends on what you did to trigger its threat assessment. Protocols. The station's command center. At the frantic energy of a surgical theater where the patient had just sat up and started offering medical advice. 14 species worth of governing board members occupied the tiered observation platforms, each arguing in their native language about protocols that had stopped being relevant. Approximately 3 hours ago, Rachel stood in the center of it all, hands in her pockets, looking like someone waiting for a delayed shuttle. Velt descended from the primary platform, Inex gliding beside him. Behind them, the main display showed live feed from Storage Bay 7, where the weapon had finished converting half the security grid into something that resembled a 3-dimensional circuit diagram made of light and crystallized possibility. Explain, Velt said without preamble, what it's doing. Rachel glanced at the display. Communicating. With whom? You, me, anyone paying attention. She tilted her head, studying the patterns. That's a threat matrix. See the blue sections? Those are station systems it could disable without causing casualties. Yellow is infrastructure damage with economic impact, but minimal danger. Red is, we don't need the color commentary, the Vexery board member interrupted, scales flushing with irritation. We need it stopped, then stop antagonizing it. We are not antagonizing a weapon. You separated it from its designated operator, imprisoned said operator, and then tried to dismantle it for study. If that's not antagonism, your species needs a better dictionary. Cass, standing off to one side, made a sound that might have been a laugh or possibly just a stress response. The human does raise a point about sequential provocations. Whose side are you on? Velt demanded. The side where my station doesn't get converted into an art installation by angry ordnance. On the display, the weapon reconfigured again. This time, it built something that looked disturbingly like a speaker system. A low-frequency pulse began emanating through the bay. Orchestral Mind translated it immediately, projecting the message across every screen in the command center. Operator retrieval requested. Current separation duration unacceptable. Proposed. Resolution. Immediate return. Alternative resolution. Continued infrastructure optimization until compliance achieved. It's negotiating. INEX observed with professional admiration. Fascinating. Most adaptive weapon systems would have simply breached containment. This one is giving you options. Generous of it, Velt muttered. Actually, yes. It could have left 20 minutes ago. It's staying because leaving would complicate its operator's legal situation. The Phosphine scholar gestured at Rachel. It's protecting her interests while making its position clear. Quite sophisticated. Rachel cleared her throat. Can I talk now, or are we still doing the thing where everyone pretends I'm not the subject matter expert in the room? Silence. Great. Here's the situation. Human weapons bond to their users. Not emotionally, don't be ridiculous, but operationally. Biometric recognition, behavioral pattern matching, tactical preference learning. The longer you use one, the more it understands your approach to problems. The more it understands, the better it serves you. That's not a weapon, the Hinty representative said. That's a partnership. Now you're getting it. The weapon pulsed again, this time building a countdown timer in the air above it, using ionized particles and creative interpretation of local gravity. The numbers ticked down from 60. What happens at 0? Cass asked. Rachel shrugged. No idea. I've never let it get that upset before. Best guess? It'll probably start relocating to find me itself. To walls, security checkpoints, whatever's in the way. Won't hurt anyone. That's not its job. But your station infrastructure is going to look like someone let a toddler reorganize a filing system. 47 seconds remaining. Velt's mandibles clicked in a pattern that meant he was doing calculations he didn't like the results of. His entire career had been built on understanding weapons, their function, their purpose, their predictable lethality. This thing on his station defied every principle he'd spent 2 decades mastering. If we return it to you, he said carefully, what's our guarantee it won't attack us? Rachel looked genuinely confused. Why would it attack you? We detained you, confiscated it, tried to dissect it. And it's already addressed those grievances through negotiation. Humans don't hold grudges against people who learn from mistakes. She paused. Well, the weapons don't. The people absolutely do. But that's a different problem. 31 seconds. The Vexury representative leaned forward. This still doesn't explain why you were trying to sell it. If it's so valuable, so specialized, because it likes me too much, Rachel said flatly. I wanted something with less attachment, more professional boundaries. This one's been with me for 6 years. It knows my coffee preferences. It adjusts its grip based on my stress levels. Last month it reorganized my toolkit while I was sleeping because it decided the wrench placement was inefficient. INEX made a chiming sound. You're trying to rehome a weapon because it's too helpful? I'm trying to rehome it before it gets weird. There's a threshold where human technology stops being useful and starts being invasive. We're approaching that line. 18 seconds. Velt looked at the display, at the weapon patiently counting down while simultaneously maintaining every system improvement it had implemented. At the human who seemed more embarrassed than concerned. At his career prospects evaporating in real time. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. It had stopped being one the moment the weapon demonstrated it could rewrite station security protocols faster than his best engineers could understand them. "Fine," he said. "Take it. Leave the station. Never come back. What about the payment?" "The original 6,000 credits will be transferred to your account immediately, along with a 5,000 credit apology for the inconvenience, a formal letter of safe passage through Coalition space, and my personal recommendation that you find a sector where people don't ask questions about adaptive ordnance." Rachel smiled, a real one this time, not the dangerous expression from before. "Deal. 4 seconds." She walked into Storage Bay 7 alone. The weapon stopped its countdown at 1 second, theatrical to the end, and rotated its sensor array toward her. "Hey," she said. It didn't respond audibly, but its entire structure rippled like a cat settling after a successful hunt. Components began retracting, elaborate additions folding away, scavenged materials depositing themselves neatly in recycling bins around the bay. Within 90 seconds, it had reconfigured back to the incomplete device Felt had mocked on Oryx's table. Rachel picked it up. It was lighter now, having left behind everything it didn't need. "You're a pain," she told it. It hummed, a frequency only she could hear, transmitted through bone conduction and shared history. Rachel left Station Kepler 7 6 hours later, richer and more annoyed than when she'd arrived. Her ship, a battered courier vessel called the Persistence, had seen better decades but flew true when it mattered. The weapon sat in its usual mounting beside her pilot's chair, looking exactly like the half-finished prototype it pretended to be. In the command center, Velt watched her ship depart. Inex remained beside him, facets gleaming with the kind of speculation that kept academics employed. "You know," the phosphine scholar said, "she never actually demonstrated what that weapon does when it's completed." "I know. If that was its standby mode," Inex trailed off. "Megs, you wonder what it looks like when it's actually trying." Velt finished quietly. He spent the next 3 hours updating the Coalition database with a new entry. "Human Adaptive Weapon System Status. Do not confiscate. Do not study. Do not anger. Recommended action if encountered. Process the paperwork. Take the bribe. Pretend you saw nothing." Cass found him still at his terminal as the station's artificial night cycle began. "Sir, the governing board wants a full report." "Tell them they'll get one." Velt didn't look up from his screen. "After I figure out how to explain that we almost started an incident over a woman and her extremely loyal pile of spare parts. At least nobody got hurt. This time." Velt finally met her eyes. "Cass, do you know what bothers me most about this? That it outsmarted our entire security infrastructure? That it chose not to. At any point, it could have done whatever it wanted. Instead, it negotiated. It made demands, set boundaries, and waited for us to be reasonable." His mandibles clicked softly. "It treated us with more dignity than we treated it." Cass's feathers smoothed against her skull, her species equivalent of a thoughtful nod. "Maybe that's the real difference between their weapons and ours. Ours are built to destroy. Theirs are built to survive." Velt saved his report and stood, joints creaking from too many hours at attention. "Send a message to all Coalition border stations. Flag any human adaptive technology for observation only. No confiscation without explicit authorization from Central Command. And attach the full incident report. Even the embarrassing parts. Especially the embarrassing parts. Let them learn from our mistakes instead of making their own." Aboard the Persistence, Rachel set course for the frontier territories where questions were scarce and opportunities were plentiful. The weapon hummed its contentment, already beginning the process of optimizing her ship's power distribution without being asked. "I'm serious about finding you a new home," she told it. "This codependency thing we've got going isn't healthy. The weapon adjusted the cabin temperature to exactly how she liked it. Rachel sighed. Yeah, that's what I thought. The galaxy was full of apex predators, ancient technologies, and species that could crack planets with the right frequency. But humans have built weapons that got lonely, that learned preferences, that chose negotiation over destruction when given the choice. That, Rachel thought as she watched the stars stretch into lines, was somehow the most human thing of all. Creating tools so adaptable, they developed opinions about wrench placement and fought back against abandonment. By improving the prisons meant to contain them, the universe had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. Humanity had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of making warfare care about the people wielding it. She wasn't sure which approach would win in the end, but she knew which one she'd bet on, because the thing about human weapons wasn't that they were invincible or unstoppable or blessed with some mystical superiority. It was that they refused to be just weapons. They insisted on being partners, collaborators, extensions of human will that remembered what they fought for even when their operators forgot. And in a galaxy that had long ago forgotten the difference between tools and tyrants, that made all the difference.